Carolina great whites. Okra was in their bosom. And they took that and blended it with resilience in order to make magnificent meals. Cerasee and other herbs for what they used. Shotgun houses became the places for plant medicine. And most importantly, stories were in their soul. So this is not a new thing, right? Little did slaveholders know that they had a slave ship full of healers, all these stories. I am honored to be here with you today. 200 years later, stories still matter, still. And they are what we're using in order to mobilize our communities and empower our communities. Brown Girl is about amplifying voices, and not just any voices, but voices that have been long silenced for generations, and people told that you just not enough. We step in and say, you are enough. It doesn't matter if you're homeless. Guess what? You got a story. It doesn't matter if you're on your last dime. Guess what? Your shiny brown penny still has a story. You still have a story. And we are encouraging people to share their stories to fight for justice. Now, you might be asking, well, how do I do that, right? How do I go into my community and mobilize? All of us, it's better. Oh, okay, sorry. Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties with the power. Okay, thank you. All of us have the power to go into our communities and make a difference and encourage people to change, whether it's changing our environment. I'm going to talk about Hilton Head, South Carolina today, because I'm on the Island Leadership Committee there. Still, even though I don't live in Hilton Head, I'm still from South Carolina. That's where my ancestors were from. And we're fighting in Hilton Head, South Carolina. So many people still don't have sewage. Their yards are filled like pools of this sewage, and children are playing in it because they don't have sewage hooked up. That's a problem. And no one knows their story. And until people know their story, guess what? Nothing changes. All of us come from a community. You're going to work together today, and you're going to hear your story about your community. What is happening in your community? What are you doing to encourage people to have a voice, to speak up, to say something? The more we are silent, the more people suffer. You must be strong enough to say something. Say something. So today, I'm empowering you in our interactive workshop to say something. And we're going to do it through using genograms. Anybody know what a genogram is? Okay, a genogram is like a family tree. However, in that genogram, you're looking at patterns that have happened over generations that are still happening. For example, I told you I'm from South Carolina. In a little town in South Carolina, it may have 4 lights, maybe 5. Okay? And there are generational things that are still happening today because no one is doing what? No one is telling the story. No one is speaking up. So I'm encouraging you all today to think about in your own family, what are things, patterns, environmental patterns, health patterns, social determinant patterns that are still happening? You can't break the cycle until you realize and recognize something is happening here, right? So this is not a workshop where we're going to be pretty. We're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us God. You understand? So the first thing, if you came in and you got a sheet of paper, great. If you didn't get a sheet of paper, feel free to use your own paper or come up and just grab a sheet of paper. First thing I want you to do, we're going to start with your mom and your dad. All right? If you know them. We're going to start and we're going to tell the truth. I want everybody to repeat after me. I'm going to tell the truth. I can't hear y'all. I'm going to tell the truth. Nothing but the truth. Oh, y'all saying that like y'all don't mean it. Nothing but the truth. So help me God. Oh, come on now. Okay, and you call God God, you don't matter. I didn't name you God. I know my God. But I said, so help me God. Okay? Tell the truth. Okay? So start with your mama and your daddy. Write that down. So everybody should write down your mom and your dad's name. Write your mom and your dad. Who is your mom and who is your dad? If you don't know your mom and you don't know your dad, that's fine. Write down whoever raised you as a mother or father. And where was this? So where's your community? Name your community. Because we're going to share. So if you shy, you'll you're shy, you have to go out the window, put it in your back pocket. Not the place to shy, okay? Where is your community? So I made Hilton Head, South Carolina, where my ancestors were. My hometown is Sumter, South Carolina. So where is your community that you grew up in? Okay, grew up community that you grew up in. Your mom and your dad. Now, by your mom and your dad's name, I like for you to write down at least one environmental issue they were dealing with. If you know it, what's something that they might have been dealing with in their community? Was it trash? Was it a landfill? What's something that you can think of? And then write a health something that they were dealing with.
So poor housing condition is that, I know that.
Yes, absolutely. Those are social determinants, absolutely. So name a social determinant or an environmental issue that your parents were dealing with. If you don't know what a social determinant is, just Google it, okay? So what were they dealing with? Now, this is all prettied up here, but it's basically the same thing that I'm sharing. We're going to be telling stories today, okay? And this I just said, we use narrative to promote change, and we're talking about authentic voices. No fake stuff, right? We want your true voice. And then if you know your grandparents, go back a generation. So you start with your mom and dad. If you know your grandparents, go back a generation. What were they dealing with in the community? What were your grandparents dealing with? What is it? Afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Please get some paper if you like. You're doing an activity. Papers up front. What were your grandparents dealing with? Were they dealing with poor housing conditions? Were they dealing with landfills in the community? You know, we used to live in a community, my sons and I, they had a landfill right down the street. All of us had asthma. So we could barely breathe. We stayed in the doctor's office like every week. Moved to another community, guess what? I don't even know what a landfill is. Everything has improved. Their communities, based on each social economic status, but they feel that they can put this landfills anywhere, right? Because you got, what you gonna say anyway? Huh? Where you going? Where you moving to? You gonna move from one place to the other because you don't have any money. This is where storytelling comes in. This is where we begin to empower. Okay? So go ahead. Your mama and your daddy, then go back a generation, your grandparents. Go back a generation, your grandparents. What were they dealing with? Social determinants. What kind of health issues were they dealing with? If you don't have paper, feel free to go up front and get some paper and a pen. Health issues. What were they dealing with? And remember, this is a tell the truth session. We're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help us, what? God. And you can go back to the next generation, your great-grandparents. What were they dealing with? What was in the community with your great-grandparents? Okay? Did they have any issues, environmental issues? Did they have any social determinants, any health issues? They told me this ain't church, you got to stay in one place now. So let me go up front. Tell me, is this better? It's a good place. Now, how much? Who's going to turn this for me? I need to stand right here?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, normally I move around, so this is a learning curve for me to stay still for a little bit. Okay? How far have you all gotten so far? Did everybody raise your hand if you named your parents? Raise your hand. Don't be shy. Just in the shy place. Okay? Raise your hand if you named your grandparents. Good. If you knew them. How about your great-grandparents? All right, good. Now, in a few minutes, you're going to sit with at least 3 other people in the room, and you're going to start recognizing patterns because genograms look at patterns, what's repeating itself. So if your mama dealt with something, then if your grandmama dealt with the same thing, and if your great-grandmother dealt with the same thing, that's a pattern, right? And this is where we come in and telling our stories. How do we break those negative patterns that are negatively impacting our ecosystems in our communities? Take another minute, and then I'm going to have you sit with the group. Let's count off 1, 2, 3. So you all are being so shy and so kind. So you don't have to sit right beside a person, but just sit in the area. Can this be a group right here? Okay, right here next to me. Can you all be a group? The back area, the 2 ladies, can you all just sort of group yourselves? Is that okay? Okay. Up and down, supposed to stand the same place. Okay, if you can, let's take 2 minutes in your group and share some patterns that you've noticed. What are some environmental and social determinants that you've noticed that are generational pattern going on in your community? So please share with your group for 2 minutes. Now, this is where we are. We've worked this entire thing so far. You've identified the characters in the story. You've identified the setting. Where is your community? Who is telling the story? You are. That's the point of view. And what issues, you're looking at the issues. And now what we're doing is sharing in our groups. You're sharing. What are you noticing those patterns? And then supporting. So we're doing the last two. Here you're sharing and supporting. What did we realize are some issues that we're facing and how we're supporting each other? So please take 2 minutes to share, okay? 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sure. And I'm sorry, I would come back there to address you, but they told me I have to stay in one place. So you're welcome to come if you have a question.
Yeah, next time I have a camera around that easily.
Okay, sorry. So take 1 more minute to talk, and you'll have time to talk later. 1 more minute. $30 seconds remaining. 30 seconds, and you'll have time to talk later. Okay, try to wrap it up in the next 10 seconds, and then you'll have time again to talk later. 10 seconds. Okay, and if we can bring it to the center, and let's start where we started earlier. Oh, microphone check, 1, 2. Let's start where we started earlier. If you can, we're going to have time to talk again later. Excuse me. If you will just center yourself where you are, you shared a lot in that 2 or 3 minutes. Hand on your heart, and we're going to breathe in on our stories again, and then we're going to share. Take a deep breath. And as you're taking a deep breath, just let your story know, I honor you. Take another deep breath. You don't have to rush your breath. You just take your time. Take another deep breath. And think to yourself, I honor you. You're honoring yourself. You're honoring your story. Okay. We're going to start with this group here. Can you all give us a 1 minute overview of what you all noticed as some of those environmental and health patterns that you all have seen in your family and in your community? Yes, ma'am. Would you like to? Oh, I can't take the mic. Okay. Thank you, young man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, our stories were unique, but what I noticed for me, like relating relating to my group is that the element of PTSD, like my parents coming from a war-torn country. I don't know if you want to speak.
Yeah, I also noticed something similar in my family. I'm from Frederick, Maryland, but my parents are both from the South, North Carolina and Alabama. And I noticed what PTSD looks like through racial trauma. My parents are both in the military, so from that, family issues, domestic violence, and exposure to being in settings like late stage sharecropping and what that looked like and how that contributed to other forms of health issues. So we kind of all noticed something like that.
I can also say that we had a common theme of enjoying sweets and desserts and how it manifested into hypertension and diabetes. And some of that had to do with what we were eating to kind of pacify ourselves coming out of enslaved environments, Jim Crow, sharecropping. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you all want to go back? That's fine. We can go like that way. Yeah, that's my mistake. Thank you, sis. Thank you. Look, just bring it back up all the way.
So we didn't think 2 minutes was enough, so we didn't get to everybody. Just thought I'd mention that. So what we'd like to do is allow Mindy to tell her story because we didn't get to hear it.
Thank you. Thanks. My story echoed some of the previous ones with PTSD from different racial issues, immigrating in their late 30s, both my parents, and a lot of the reason they left was climate issues on the island that they were from. So I think that contributed to coming over, and then once they got here, the PTSD of leaving their home country.
I want to give a hand. You could give her a hand. Oh, well.
Oh, thank you so much. And we'll have time at the end to continue sharing.
Okay.
So on my father's side, my great grandmother Reese, she was an indentured servant, and her mother was a slave, and like she still had like the irons that they used to stamp people with, and so that history is there. And then on my mother's side, even though my grandmother grew up on a farm, but young motherhood grows up in the runs in the family, where their moms before 16 and 17 years old. I think my generation, me and my sisters, like we stopped that. But my grandmother was a mom at the age of 14. Her mom was a mother at the age of 12. So just talking about that type of emotional trauma, children raising children, that type of determinant. So yeah.
You're supposed to go to.
We're here to support you. We're on what? Support. We're supporting you. You all can do this. Yes, let's give them a hand. They can do this. Let's support them. This is a healing place. Some of you maybe thought you were just coming to a session. You know, this is a healing place. Okay, so we're here to support you.
For our group, there was like a lot of themes of like violence and like pollution from like urban life, poverty, a lot of so for me personally, I grew up in the Philippines, so we experienced a lot of like foreign like people coming to our land and taking our land. So there's a lot of like trauma from that, and like our resources being taken from that. So
Okay, so our group didn't get to discuss with everybody, but for mine, I went back to my grandparents' generation, where I mentioned that 3 out of my 4 grandparents were growing up on food assistance programs in their schools because they couldn't always afford their different meals at home. And they actually, in a session yesterday, it was brought up about how some of those programs are going away now. And it reminded me like the impact that that can have on people growing up. I didn't deal with it personally, but I know in my family, we did deal with that. And it reminded me to think about how that being available changed the course of my family for them. So. Oh, you're so
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So I grew up in Hampton, Hampton Roads, Virginia, and my family experienced a lot of flooding, and I feel like that caused financial trauma, just like moving a lot for my parents, and I feel like it's kind of reflected onto me, and I'm very frugal with money, and it's like something I'm kind of getting better at, but it's definitely a process just seeing them struggle with money and constantly moving state to state and stuff.
Thank you. Oh, okay. We have in the last group here, I think up front. Thank you for taking the mic to each group. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Hi. So we came kind of late, so we didn't really understand the assignment, but from hearing what everyone else was saying, I guess I'd want to share like one time I was like at a museum in Scotland, which is really random, but it talked about like how other people like would come to like Bengal, which is now like modern day Bangladesh, which is where I'm from. And then they would take like a certain kind of material. I can't remember what it is. And then like, I don't know. I feel like I've never like felt something like so deeply, but like it really made me think about like my history and like how I'm somewhere completely different and like what my ancestors went through. So I think I try to like think about that a lot when I'm doing environmental justice work.
Would you like to share something?
Yeah, yes. So similarly to Khadija, as like a South Asian woman and a Muslim, I've noticed that a lot of like modern severe climate change, like repercussions, are in like South Asian countries and Muslim dominated, like wildfires, floods, droughts, etc. And even like recently, like in Libya, the tragedy with the flooding and natural disasters. So I guess like that really piqued my interest, and I feel like in my community, like I guess brown people like aren't as involved in the geosciences field. So I guess taking all of that, like the tragedies of natural disasters affecting like brown people like at high rates, and also a lack of education, I want to like keep pursuing this field to educate like other South Asian people and like share like stories of like optimism and hope, and teach them about like climate justice and resilience.
Let's give everyone a hand. So we walked through all of the steps here as we're looking at narrative justice and what it is. Okay, thank you. As we're looking at narrative justice and what it is. So any questions so far? If you wanted to take this, and this was called a genogram. You're looking a genogram. And what you're doing, unlike a family tree, you're looking at repeat patterns. What repeat patterns are happening and how do we break those patterns in order to fight for justice? Okay. So what we have with Brown Girl, we have a story roadmap, so to speak. So what we do is try to create empowerment zones. And these are story empowerment zones that we create in global communities. So in Africa, we have, in Team Ghana, we have a story zone in our school that we have there. In Brazil, we have a story zone that we work with. And of course, in Baltimore and in other areas, we work in empowering folks through having immersive experience to share their stories. How do you do that? And this is something that you can have in your own community. So our goal is to collaborate with at least 100 community partners. How many of you work in the school system, or you maybe work in a community organization somewhere where someone can share a story? Just raise your hand. Anyone work somewhere where someone can share a story? So we're trying to get community partners. And in addition to that, we're trying to redesign community parks. A lot of people go to community parks, especially if they're housing insecure children. How do we use parks as story zones, okay? And overall, we like to have at least 1 million stories from community members to share. And this is going to empower folks to make a change. So the main thing that we're doing here is having first-person storytelling. It's very important. You can hear a story, but when you tell a story in your own voice, it's totally different, right? So for an example, I'll tell you a story about my grandmother, a quick story. So my grandmother grew up without knowing either of her parents. Okay, how did that impact her? Now she's 87. She never saw her mother, never saw her father. I can't imagine what that feels like. I can't imagine how that has impacted her life and how she interacts with community. But we know that how things happen to you cause you to act a certain way in community, right? So that's my grandmother's story. I could tell you my story of how I slept in a car when I was a kid in a 1975 gray Ford, right? And I knew that education was the key in order for me to have a better life. And so I spent my days in libraries, reading books, being immersed in what? Stories. And I watched my mother at the time, who was a teen mom, put herself through college, went back to college, and gave us a way for a better life. Do you see the difference there? I told my grandmother's story, but was that my story? No, that was just her story. But do you see the difference between sharing my story and then sharing someone else's story? So what we're trying to do is encourage people to share your story, your first person voice, in order to make a difference in community. Now, I'm not going to go through all these slides because you all can read and you can always get this at different times. But this is where we are. So we're in schools. We have research projects where we encourage people to go into the community. We write wherever you are. I'm crazy about writing, absolutely crazy about writing. In the garden, we're writing, okay? No matter where we are. You can write in a hospital. You can go into hospitals and write with people who are sick. We're writing everywhere. And most importantly, you can go into communities that are facing issues and you can write what is going on and how can your voice make a significant difference, okay? And we're going to talk about next is building your narrative footprint. One of the things we do, how many people like to eat in here? I do. I love to eat and I love to cook, okay? A gullah geechee cook. I love to eat and I love to cook, especially okra rice and all those wonderful things. We find that community table is a great place for people to share. So they're eating, they're sharing. When you have a full belly, you can really tell your story and your authentic self. These are things that you can do in your community, where you can set up a community table, allow people to share their stories, what's going on, and how can we fix it, okay? So remember, what's the tool that we're using here in order to mobilize? What are we doing, sir? Paul, what are we doing, Paul? I'm talking to you, Paul, that Paul right there. What are we doing? Around that voice, sharing. Say something. Say something. Don't be afraid. You know how many people are afraid to say something? I know some folks talked about violence in here, right? I know what that feels like, to have someone treat you like something less than what you are. But I had to get the power to do what? Say something. That's not okay. That's not okay, Booth. You're not going to talk to me like that. You're not going to treat me that way, okay? Say something, all right? If you notice, I limp from here to here, right? Because 9 years ago, I broke my leg, ankle, and my foot. And a doctor left me like this. They messed it all up. Do you know how many people in marginalized communities deal with medical malpractice that is gone unseen? It's an invisible population of folks. And they don't talk. You want to say something? That's right. That's right. Because they think we can get away with it, right? And some folks might say that's not an environmental problem. That's not a problem. Yes, it is, because it's how people interact with their ecosystem, their environment, right? So I could have gone mad several times. Can you imagine? One day I was actually walking, the next day I wasn't walking at all. And it was years before I could take one step. I haven't even been walking, taking steps for more than 4 years. Might be 2. I had to teach myself all these calluses on my hand. I was crawling through the house, taking care of my children. Okay. That's a problem. But that's somebody's story. I'm not the only one, right? There's someone in your community who also has a what? Story about interacting with medical malpractice. And they just what? May not feel like they have the power to say something. Yes. Oh, absolutely. That's an entire, oh my goodness, right? Praise God that I'm here. I have 3 sons, 3. My last son, thank God I'm still here, because they took him before I could even leave because I was bleeding so much, right? But I had advocates, someone that could stand for me. So they know they couldn't treat me any kind of way because mama was in the other room, right? But imagine those women who don't have mama or auntie or grandma in the other room and they bleed out on the table. Right? So thank you for mentioning that. Maternal and childhood, that's a story that we need to mobilize. We need to get these stories. It has to happen. I'm so passionate about this. You know, I'm not in the university classroom full time anymore, but I'm glad because the community is my classroom. And I feel an urgency in my soul that this needs to go into the world, and people need to gather stories. We need to be story gatherers and say, hey, you know something, you got to say something. You can't let it go. And we can change by opening our mouth. We got to say something, write it, say it. We cannot be silent. It's just not an option. Okay. Any questions about the table, the community table? So we're sharing all the things like we just shared here. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a hard one, but it's a good question. I can just tell you what I've done. Excuse me. I try to make sure that people are in a safe space. So when we do our workshops, for an example, our community workshops, I try not to have more than 10 people. So we're in an intimate space. And we can share and we sign an agreement, whatever happens, unless you want me to go out and tell, I'm going to keep it right here, right? So that's one way to create a safe space. If you're working with family members or some other folks, we might also encourage, just work with them, take time. My grandma doesn't always want to talk about how she grew up, right? Because that's painful for her. So you have to do it in teaspoons. And the basic thing I just find, just love them until it stirs something in their soul and they want to speak or they want to write. Did that answer your question? You're welcome.
One is, for example, not being in this type of setting group.
Mm-hmm.
This is the European-centric type of mentality. This is the box they have created, and we, the collective society, just buy into it. Now, I always say, give me a circle. I don't care. You have to move the whole entire setting.
Yes.
But I never present unless there is a circle.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, and I did intentionally from the back to see faces, beautiful faces. Because this doesn't have eyes.
Right.
And to be this way in church and in classes is to ignore who they are. Mm-hmm. And I don't even see the faces of the people in front of me. This is violence.
Wow.
I call it violence.
Yes.
Because it takes us away from one another, separate us, divide us. But if we are in a circle, we are going to enrich our lives, look at each other when they can. And if they are sad or happy, it will be our beautiful part of sharing their narratives. So that's one way.
I honor that. And because I honor that, guess what we're going to do? We're going to make a daggone circle. Okay? All right. So and if you want to be on the side of the circle, if you're not feeling 500%, that's fine. So let's do that quickly. We can make a little middle circle. I have to stay in one place, but let's do that. Now we're going to disrupt the system. We're going to disrupt the system. Okay? We don't have to change all the chairs, just a few chairs. Okay? Yes, my baby child is going to help. Okay, come on. Go ahead, help. Quickly. How did you cut yourself? Okay, we'll figure it out. Okay, sit. Right, they're going to tell me, ma'am. But that's okay. Revolution has to happen, okay? The revolution begins right here in the story room. Disrupt. Thank you. What's your name? Oh, yes. I love it. Okay, I love it. Okay. Pardon me for sharing. I have to stand here so they can see me on streaming. So excuse me. No. Thank you. So see how organic narratives are, right? See how we just stop and just shut it down? Yeah, come on, sit by me, Paul. Okay. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Pardon me for standing, but I have to be in one spot. This is beautiful. I love it. Do you all feel that? Did you feel the shift? Did you feel the shift in the room when we just got together in this circle? Okay. Yes. Can we honor our sister who said, let's do a circle? Can we honor that? Yes. We honor you. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is me, right? I'm that girl still. All right. You know why I love this picture? It reminds me of a time that I was brave and bold and on the playground. And I double dog dare you to step on my shoes, okay? Because you know what I'm gonna do with this Carolina clay dirt? I'm gonna make a hopscotch little thing on the ground, and you better not mess it up, okay? So all of us have to take our own journeys to enough, right? To enough. I am enough. Hello, somebody. I am enough. And you don't have to validate that. But I am enough. And you got to tell yourself that every day. I am enough. I am enough. I am. Period. Point blank. And I double dog dare you to step on that. You got to have that kind of oomph when we're doing this work. Okay? Because you cannot fight for justice, truly fight for justice for other folk, whether it's the climate, whether it's pollution, whether it's food insecurity. You can't do it unless you have the self-confidence, right? Because there are going to be some folk that are going to come against you. And you can't be scared. This is not a scared work, okay? You cannot be afraid. So you have to tell yourself that you're enough before you even encounter them, right? And then you can draw a sign, a little thing in the red dirt, but you got Carolina clay dirt enough, some Maryland dirt. Say, you know what? You're not going to step over this line because, over here, we stand for justice, right? Period, point blank. And you're not crossing the line until we get the change that we want to see. Okay? All right. So community parks, this is very important. Very important. Every community should at least have a park. Even if it's a rundown, raggedy park, they got a park. Okay? Might not be able to take a dog or something out there, but they got a park. Might have a fence that you get all ripped up on the leg if you try to jump, but they got a park. So what we're trying to do is reimagine these places. Community parks are important to me because when I was that little girl that you just saw, we spent a lot of time in the park when we didn't have any place to go after school, right? but my mama took us to the park. And you know what? I didn't think I was poor because my mom never said so. We were shining every day. We went to school. We had good grades, and mama didn't tell me anything different, but she loved me. I didn't think I was poor. So if anybody told me I was poor, they had a problem, not me. All right. So we went to these parks, and I remember the magnolia trees and the swings and the merry-go-rounds. Imagine how empowering that could be, because guess what? I'm not the only kid who experienced homelessness. Think there's a kid in your community who is experiencing homelessness right now? You may not know it, but guess what? They are. So we can take these parks and reimagine them and turn them into healing spaces, right? Where they can share their stories, where they have little toys or something in the park where they can just write and you can leave it there. Maybe little letter boxes. I envision having letter boxes with paper and kids can just write and leave their stories, and parents can write and leave their stories. Imagine the power if we could tell somebody we just needed $5 to buy some pork and beans and weenies. That's it, $5. And we could leave that in a mailbox in the park. And somebody went in and put that in that $5 in there in a little envelope that we left there. Do you know how that could have changed my life that day? Come on now. I know what it's like to look in the car looking for 50 cents, just 50 cents. That's enough to get us a little bit of something and all that, but it's a little bit of something to take us to the next day. I am not the only one. There are kids in schools across the nation. There are kids in communities across the world. Only 50 cents will make a difference and change their life. And they can do that through a story left at a community park in a mailbox. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's right. So what do? If we know a park in our community makes us feel unsafe, what do we need to do? Tell the what? What we said we we're going to do when we came here. Tell the truth, tell the story, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but truth. So help me, what? God. So I'm going to go to those leaders in my community, right? I'm going to tell folks we need to do what with this park? We want to reimagine this park. We want to build, but we need some help, and we don't feel safe. We feel like a lot of shooting is going on. We feel like a lot of foolery is going on. How can we stop that? So maybe we have a community policing system in the park. So you get together and you organize. We must organize, and we must talk to each other and tell, why do you feel unsafe in this park? Why? What happened? People just aren't going to feel unsafe just because. That is linked to a what? Story. You understand? Thank you, Mother. We appreciate that. Thank you. We honor that. Yes.
I don't know about North Carolina, but I just want to share a resource.
Yes.
So for those of you that live in Maryland, if you have situations like the park that you mentioned, or other unsafe places in your neighborhood, Maryland has what's called the Neighborhood Design Center. And the Neighborhood Design Center works with local communities, local businesses to help do exactly what you're saying. They have planners that they work with, and they do redesign, mock-ups and modeling and things for different communities, and it's free. They're a nonprofit organization.
Can you repeat the name of it?
Yes, the Neighborhood Design Center.
Neighborhood Design Center. Thank you for that. That's beautiful.
They work with my community actually to plan and design a community garden. And it's been about 10 years now. And the garden plan is in phases. So we have the first part of the project that happened almost 10 years ago now. And it's a thriving community garden with plot partners, but there's an expansion that's planned, which they also designed, that will allow other people to come in and have plots for free, and for it just to be a central focus point of the community. So they'll have like benches, things for the kids, picnic tables, things where people can come and fellowship together.
I love that. Taking me back to our community. What? Table. Come on now. Bring a little cornbread out here. Let's sit down and talk. Okay? Yes.
As far as I know, they serve all of Maryland, but you can contact, I don't know which part of your community. I don't know the contact. You can look at their website, but I know the folks in Prince George's County are very good at sharing resources, and they can help help you, they'll tell you who contact.
Wonderful. And so some of you may be saying, well, I don't live in Maryland, right? And I don't know they have this in my community. Guess what? You can call them and ask them. They say no, guess what? Well, now you do, because guess what? You have someone that's going to volunteer to get it started, or not even volunteer. You can contract me, boo. Okay. Yeah. And we're going to get started. Okay. So if they don't have any in your community, don't be afraid to do what? To ask. Thank you. That's powerful. Thank you so much. I'm going to look that up. And of course, park is more than a place to play. We think, grow, and we change the world. I didn't change the world when I turned 48, right? It was that little girl you saw. The fire started then when I was on the swing in the park and going back to the car that I lived in. Get it? Let me tell you again, I did not change the world when I turned 48, right? It started when I was that little girl on the swing at the park without a home. Let me say it loud for the people in the back. I did not change the world when I was 48. So what am I saying to you? The young people that are at those parks, even if you're an older person at those parks and you're young at heart, guess what? The change can still happen. So it's more than a bench. I want, when people go by a park bench, I want you to see more than that. See a world change. See a story told. You know what I envision? Again, I'm crazy about words. Words just all on the bench. Words on the bench. How do we put words on the bench? Empowerment words on the bench. So maybe someone could come to the park, see a word like, you are beautiful. You are enough. That might do something, right? You never know. How can we change the park benches even? Okay. Any questions so far? Anything? Anything stirring in your soul? What's your name? Daryl. Anything stirring in your soul, Daryl? Okay. Mm-hmm.
And for so long, she thought that the reason why she was successful was because she was able to work with them. But her therapist said what you should be doing is not running from the 8 or 11-year-old Barbie Davis, but also embracing that girl who was there. Because without the 8-year-old Barbie Davis, you would never have become the 44-year-old woman that you are today.
Wow.
And so I'm trying to make connections between this image here of the little girl on the bench, right? And the woman who returns to the park, right?
Wow.
So what guidance or resources do you have for people who've been so traumatized, right, by life experiences that it's hard to find their voice or speak their truth?
Journaling has been powerful for myself. Journaling has saved my life on so many occasions because trauma is often multi-layered trauma. It's not just one thing, right? So I told you about the homelessness, but I didn't tell you about domestic violence. I tell you about this and I tell you about that, right? So what I've done over the years is journal. On those days when I felt like I didn't want to live anymore, I journaled. On those days when I felt like I just couldn't do it, I journaled. When all I had was 1 penny left after leaving a domestic violence situation, I had 1 penny, literally one. And you know why I didn't spend it? I keep a penny in my pocket at all times. Because my mother said, if you have a penny, a shiny brown penny, baby, you never broke. That's what my mom told me when I was a little girl, and I believed it, right? So here I was, a grown woman with at the time, 2 children to take care of. And guess what was in my wallet? A penny. So when he said, leave, fine, I'm leaving, bye. Go on, keep the house, do what you gotta do. But I got my penny and I got my boys. And I sat that brown penny, that shiny brown penny, and I had my journal, was writing, and I wrote a letter to God. And I said, God, this is what I need. I have 2 boys that I need to take care of, and everything is gone. And I have this penny. And I wrote a list and told God every single thing that I needed. Within 30 days, God had answered exceedingly. I had 2 job offers for 2 major universities within 30 days. And I wrote it down to the salary. I said, this is a salary I need. If I'm gonna take care of my boys, God, this is a salary that I need. I had double that. The offer they gave me was double that. You understand? So journaling is powerful. Letter writing is powerful. So I would encourage folks in order to, because it's hard to go back to those places and it hurts. But I encourage them, when you feel that, you can't get over the hurt until you feel it. You have to feel it, right? You have to be in that space and feel it. And then you know what I say to myself? I let it go. And you might not let it go all at the same time, right? Because there are folks that I get up and say, I forgive every single day. But I have to keep saying it. Because if I don't keep saying it, I'm going to still be mad. That's the truth. I'm going to still be rolling my eyes and they ain't even around. I'm just rolling my eyes thinking about them. Just got an attitude. I thought about you. Okay, just hot, sucking my teeth and then put my hand on my hip, roll my eyes, doing all that. Okay, only because I thought about you. So it's an everyday journaling, letter writing, truth telling journey. Tell the truth to your daggone self. Hello?
So like some people might not feel comfortable responding with intentions, like maybe like they enjoy singing or they enjoy rapping. What songs do you feel like, or write some poetry? So figure out what it is that they like to do, dance, even if it's basketball or if they paint. I ask people sometimes, like some of my friends with cousin time, what colors are you feeling today? Because maybe right now you don't know how you feel, and then I'll ask them when he said the colors. What does that color represent?
Did that help? Wonderful. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna add one more. She's a scientist in America, so she brings these two amazing things together, and she made me realize how much we can this. That sometimes, because we're trained to be separate, we're trained to be the center of the universe, like that. 100%, 100% physical. That's what we are taught. But that's it. It's made for you. She said, if you are contemplating a flower, where it makes us all how beautiful you are, she says, realize flowers. And it doesn't matter the word to me, amazing, because we all love to be in a and sitting on that bench. Sometimes you see there is a kind of those leaves are parasites. And this is who we really are. This is where we really come from. Sometimes when you cannot journalist or sing or dance, just open up to the idea, I am this word. I am this rock. And this rock is looking at me. And this water, this lake is looking at me, sending me smell, sending me dance. They dance, I can't. And the sounds that we cannot create ourselves, they make it. And I thought it contributed to my life.
Beautiful. Thank you all for giving you this great information. You wanted to share?
I kind of want to share something when we were talking about running from the past, because I feel like that's something that happened to me very recently, where I had like this like light bulb moment, because like I grew up like at the poverty levels in like New York City, so I spent a lot of my life like and focus and my energy on trying to not be poor. But then last month I went, because my parents immigrated here from Malaysia, which is like a very developing country, only became a country like less than 100 years ago. And this time when I went back, it was not my first time going back, but I think that maybe now I'm like a little bit older, like because I've been working in like the working world since the last time I went. Like it really like I went there with like a very different mindset this time, because when I talk with my cousins and my family, like some like I really made me reflect more on like everything in terms of like reconciling like my feelings about growing up poor and what I had to do to not be poor, like the things I had to do by myself because my parents came to this country like very poor and they were very poor there too. So then like I always felt like I had to do a lot to escape that on my own. But when I went back and I had conversations now that I'm older, like I have a different lens on it because even though I had to do a lot, they also did a lot because they started like even lower than what I thought was like low. Like I thought it was like being poor in America, but then it's like they started like being poor in Malaysia. And I also got to talk with my grandma who's like 89 now, and like I heard, and I think maybe because I'm older, she told me more about her life growing up that I never knew before, and I never would have been able to guess. And then I just have like a totally different understanding of my past. So it's like I feel like I got a really good, like I don't know how to describe it, but that just made me want to tell you that when you talk about running from the past.
You had the opportunity to check. Yeah, even though you said it was poverty, but when you compared it to your family, you had the opportunity to actually check your privilege, your American privilege. Yeah.
Let me tell you, this is some good stuff. I could do this all day. Okay, I could do this all day, really. I want to honor your time like I honor your stories. We have a few minutes left. So I want to hear what your takeaway is. You said, and I'm not going through all the slides. If you want the slide, you can email me at info@bgwellness.org, info@bgwellness.org. My name is Rika, R-I-C-A Wilson. And the website is www.bgwellness.org. This is my work, right? I love this work. This is what I was born to do. Words, stories, travel the world, and encourage people to say something for justice. One thing I want to mention before you share, I was at Howard University where I used to teach, and I had gone on the yard. I graduated from an HBCU, so anytime on the yard you have the plots for sororities and fraternities. But I saw the tree at Howard when I was at Howard. When I went back on the hilltop, I don't know how to get to it. Excuse me. Yeah, okay, here it is. When I was on the hilltop this particular day with my niece and my boys, after I hadn't been there for a while, I don't what's going on. I can't go to. How do I go to the next slide? Just hit next, maybe. Okay. Oh, that's me doing a story at Augusta Fells High School. I go into the schools that's in the community. Oh, that's on the street, honey. I cook my gullah food and I take it to the streets. Okay. It was in the wintertime, it was cold, and I like to make folk food and take it down to the city, and I fed them, and then we're gonna talk. We're gonna talk about your story. So that's cornbread, that's homemade gluten-free cornbread, boo. Okay. Sharing, okay. This is what I wanted to do. The trees, like we have the plots on campus, right? Imagine we go to our parks or in our communities and we have story trees. Imagine how powerful that will be when we can use trees as story trees. That's a passion of mine. So I am complete. I'm so glad that you all came here today. And I have to tell you a story before you got here. So because of the nerve damage in my from the medical malpractice and what they did and left me unable to walk, I normally don't wear suits and things. I love wearing suits, but I haven't in a long time because they hurt, right? So I put this on this morning because normally I just have something comfortable. And I said, I want to dress up today to look decent. I was standing in the bathroom for at least 35 minutes before you all got here because my body is hurting so bad because of having this suit on, right? And I saw my sister Stacy, and I was like, I got to get this off. And I went downstairs, and they didn't have anything in the student bookstore. But I wanted to be honest because I said we want to tell the truth, nothing but truth, and the whole truth, so help us God, right? So I want you to know my truth. And so I had to get through that challenge, even to get to this workshop to share with you because my entire body is stinging, is screaming because of the nerve damage. And so I just wanted to tell my truth as we're doing our takeaways. So what I take away from this is I was on assignment to be here today. right? My sister says God is the master logistical coordinator. I was on assignment. So despite the pain, I was on assignment. And my kids said, Mama, you sure you can do that? You don't look right. Your eyes red. They were so worried. My boys were so, and normally they're not. That's my baby child. My older sons, normally they're cool cucumbers, right? They were getting ready to just pull me from there like, Mom, you can't do this because you're not feeling well. I said, I'm going. I'm just going to go to the bathroom and I'm going to stay right there. I'm going to take the jacket off or whatever. And I can just stay there until I get enough strength to come in here. So that is my truth and that is my story today because I believe in this thing so much in my very soul. So just like my ancestors was in 1823 was still sharing stories in Hilton Head, South Carolina, this is my charge, right? This is my charge. This is my gift to the world because God said so. And I'll tell the story and then we're going to go around and you do your takeaway, please. They often tell a story about, I used to tell my students a story about a person who died and went to heaven. They got there and all these boxes were in the room. They looked in the box and they said, what's this, God? What is this? God said, look in the box. These are all the people you did not touch with the gifts that I gave you. These are your gifts and you didn't use them. So you didn't touch these folks. I don't know about you, but I don't want any boxes in my room, right? When I walk in, I want everything poured out of me that I should have given to the world. No boxes. So when I'm talking about storytelling and narrative justice and standing up for folks who can't stand for themselves, we didn't get into asthma and all the other kinds of stuff that happen in communities because of the pollution. But when I talk about stories, I'm talking about my boxes. I'm talking about my gifts. I'm talking about being poured out into the world. There's nothing left. So when they put me in the ground, honey, there ain't nothing left. There ain't nothing left because I poured it all out through this thing called storytelling. Okay.
My takeaway is the power of vulnerability and transparency. I think before we were all like spread out, just listening to
Rika.
Listening to Dr. Wilson.
Oh. You sound like my friend. He like say that. Oh, you mean Dr. Wilson? Because I tell people my name's Rika. Like, oh, you mean Dr. Wilson? Oh, go ahead.
We're listening to Dr. Wilson. But I think once you suggested for us to go into the circle, and we got into the circle, and there was like a moment of family. There's a moment of sharing. There's a moment of like, I actually feel like I know who some of the people are. And when I walked in this room, I didn't know. And that also helps with networking and creating better stories together, and partnering and moving forward with justice stories. So that's my takeaway.
Thank you.
Thank you. So first, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Wilson. So I'll just say, I'm glad I came. Almost didn't come.
Thank you.
God puts us where we need to be when we need to be here. And
thank you, sister. Thank you.
I didn't have a lot of expectations coming in, but like there are a lot of emotions coming up in me. So I have a feeling like, these questions that we were asking are really good for me. I love hearing a snippet of everyone's story in this room. And it was great. I'm glad that I'm on my own journey. And it's great for me to hear how others are their journey as well, telling your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just echoing the same sentiments as the others. Thank you so much for this wonderful facilitation.
You're welcome.
And it's been so cool to hear everybody's stories. I'm just still hanging on to the piece earlier about what generational curses are we breaking? I know we spent a little bit of time talking about domestic violence and how in my family it went from physical violence to emotional violence. And well, in my generation, well, at least he doesn't yell at me. He can still be emotionally violent, but at least he doesn't hit me. At least he doesn't yell at me. But I feel myself breaking those chains in my generation. So I'm spending a little more time with that. I just had an epiphany about that like a week ago. So it's timely, and I really appreciate you being able to open that space for more epiphanies.
Oh,
So
you're
thank
welcome.
you.
You're welcome. But believe me, I was there because I said, I used to say that. Well, you didn't hit me, so it can't be. And I watched Oprah yesterday, and I can't be the lady like Oprah. She was getting beat up like a different kind of way. But what I didn't think is that words hurt, right? And guess what? His words were the bullets. His words were the punches, right? The emotional abuse, the financial abuse, and everything else that came along with that. And so thank you for saying that, because often people think domestic violence is just you got slapped. No, I didn't get slapped with a fist or a hand. I didn't get punched with a fist or slapped with a hand, but oh, believe me, it hurt my soul. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I also have different health things, just usually sit in my cabin for all morning, sucking waste. But I think really my biggest takeaway is like very validating that the storytelling component has impact. Like so immediately, like we were talking about, so immediately connecting with strangers in the room. And I think I work in like race, they're all part of the environmental defense fund, but not as much as scientists because science background, and that's part of it. I was hired to do, but my job is really to make sure that the science is like means anything else to anything else besides like population factors. And so I've been pushing for like storytelling, narratives. You know, it's hard from voice of PDF because you don't want to be extracted with the stories, but you want to be able to share the human side of things that has some unique connection. So I think for me this was very valuable to like stay in this like pushing, keep pushing people to do that because our science doesn't, like the academic Western science doesn't get back.
Thank you, sister.
Yeah,
thank you.
First, I want to say everybody. And I will say I'm feeling emotional, vulnerable. I wanted to come. I almost didn't make it because this room is hard to find.
True.
But I was expecting a different outcome. And my takeaway is I'm able to envision assistance for somebody who's close to me who's suffering from PTSD. So thank you for the question, and I don't have elegant words, but the appreciation for the vulnerability.
Thank you.
I think something that stuck with me was when you talked about your child self. And I think like remembering your inner child is really important when you remember the work that you do today and how it just like it's still you, so there's a connection to your growth.
Okay. So measured in what I contribute. Well, what I did gather is I'm really thinking about conditions, right? Conditions where folks can, you know, like kind of like you're saying, like, you wouldn't even feel the need to experience discomfort, you know, you know, just those sorts of things. And like what other conditions, like when it comes to like development and developing countries and like legacies of things like that, what that looks like, you know, moving forward. I think a lot of longer term strategies, 10, 15 years, you know, as we're talking more about impact, we have tools, citizen science, and all these things to be like, I don't know about projects in the 70s. So, you know, if it's just that people didn't know, then, you know, I feel like there's an opportunity to, like, you know, shift what our expectations are, just generally. But, you know, I'm really grateful for the space, and I do think that, you know, continuing to build narrative power at the intersection of wellness and environmental justice is extremely valuable.
Now, they already told me they're going to cut me off in a minute. So, is there anyone that's a burning desire to share? And if you did get to share, please email me your takeaway if you'd like. Is there any one person that has a burning desire to share? Because I want to be, I want to honor the time of the other workshops. Okay, yes. So two for one. We're going to do 2 for 1. Okay, thank you.
Actually, mine's wrong. Go ahead. You said mine. I was just going to say a big thank you to Dr. Rita Wilson.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Dr. Rika, and thank you to everybody who's participated fully. So my takeaway is given to everyone, hopefully, that your story and your journey leads to your connection to this work.
Powerful. Yeah, go ahead, Mother.
And I want to say thank you to Eureka and to all of you here. And I am a part of the oral history project, telling stories, okay? That was done across the farming line. So I would just encourage everybody in here to try to reach out to your parents, grandparents, your grandparents, whoever is still alive, to get those stories because they're there and they're important to you.
I just want to say it's burning desire to acknowledge that we were so easy into doing that and you to allow us to do this because we are in the presence of the ancestors from Philippines, from Japan, from all the countries. And they are whispering to us and say, God, do it. And now we are a better, beautiful group of people thanks to the circle of life.
Thank you. That was perfect. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day. And please, if you need anything, stop by and let me know. But have a great day.